This is George Dionne with Metal Express Radio, and I'm here with Jimmy Waldo of Alcatraz. How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm doing good, George.
I ask everybody the same question in the beginning. If I knew absolutely nothing about Alcatraz, how would you describe the band's music to me?
A very well, as Graham said once, thinking man's heavy metal. It's heavy, but the lyrics are always very interesting and never boring. And musically, we try to keep it. It's fairly simple band. It's not a progressive band. We don't try to be progressive, but it's basically just a real musical, interesting heavy metal is the way I would describe it.
Born Innocent is Alcatraz's first studio album in 34 years. Were these songs that have been kicking around for decades, or did you guys, hunker down, write something new for 2020?
It's all new. There was nothing. Gosh, I'm looking here. There was not a song on the record. The only song on the record that was not written for the record specifically was Dirty Like the City, which Steve Vai had kicking around. And then Steve and I talked, and he sent me that idea. We loved it. So we did that completely from scratch, but that song had been around for a while. But yeah, everything else was pretty much fresh.
Now, did everyone contribute to the songwriting for this album?
Mainly, Graham writes all the melody and lyrics except for London 1666, which our manager Giles Lavery wrote. But Joe Stump is the main writer, I would say. I was involved in about 2 or 3 things. Dario Molo was involved. He wrote a couple of things, and I wrote a bridge to one of his. And Chris and Pelletieri wrote one, and Born Innocent. Bob Kulick wrote a couple of pieces of music, which I was involved in as a co-writer, but Bob wrote them. Those were fresh. I mean, I went to Vegas to work with Bob, and he came up with them on the spot. And then the Steve Vai thing, but let's see, Dario Molo, Chris and Pelletieri, Steve Vai. Am I missing? Oh, and then
Nozumu Nakai?
Yeah. He wrote, we got in touch and talked, and he wanted to write something, so we thought that'd be cool. So he did. He wrote Finn McCool, the music to Finn McCool. It turned out great. Nozumu and I worked on the phone a couple of times from Japan and talked about the arrangement and different parts and stuff, and that went really good. He's a really, really talented guy, and just a really nice person, easy to work with, and a great guitar player. So that one turned out good. And then we went to Japan and hung out with him, and then he played with us in Japan. He came up on one of the Rainbow songs and played. That was fun.
What led to the band getting back together to put this album out?
Graham had the Graham Bonnet Band, which I joined a couple albums before that, an album called The Book. And I got involved in that album. I did a little bit of writing, and it was pretty much well on its way by the time I got in the band. I did a little bit of writing, though, and then we started touring as the Graham Bonnet Band. And then we did another record as the Graham Bonnet Band, Meanwhile Back in the Garage, and I did more writing on that record and produced that record. And then Graham and I kind of wanted to do the Alcatraz thing again, and it made sense because everywhere we went, everybody wanted more Alcatraz stuff. And so basically we talked about it, and we really wanted to do, we wanted to do that. We didn't feel that the Graham Bonnet thing was exactly on point for what people wanted. So the audience had a lot to do with it, the requests for that stuff. And then I wanted to go that way, and Graham was into it. So Bethany, the bass player at the time for the Graham Bonnet Band, couldn't tour anymore. She has children, and it didn't make any sense for her anymore. So she had to bow out anyway, and we got Gary Shea back, the original bass player. Yep. And then we got a guitar player, Joe Stump, who can play the stuff. and that it's a difficult gig, but you have to be able to play all that. You have to. Our criteria for a guitar player, the first thing I said to people on the phone was, no parole from rock and roll. I said, you have to play that note for note. And a lot of guys would say, thank you very much. Thanks for the call. Goodbye. And a few of the guys said, oh, yeah, I can play that stuff. And I asked them to send me a demo of them playing like that. And some of the guys were really good players, but none of them were on point. And Joe Stump had that thing that Joe plays with this reckless abandon. He doesn't, a lot of energy in his playing, and yet he can play technical. I mean, he's a Berkeley teacher, so he knows what's going on inside the music, but he plays just, he goes for it. I love that. And that's what I loved about Yngwie. Yngwie and Steve Vai both. These guys were very aggressive players live. I just like aggressive guitar players, and Joe is exactly that. Very reminiscent of Yngwie. I know Joe is a big Ritchie Blackmore fan, and I find Joe even way more aggressive than Ritchie Blackmore, more like Yngwie in that sense. So I just like that kind of guitar. I like fast, aggressive guitar playing. And even as a keyboard player, I enjoy that. I can't play it, but I enjoy it. And it's fun working around these guys. I find it a real challenge, and it's fun. And Joe is just the greatest guy. We have so much fun on the road, and he's a really good guy.
Had you approached Steve Vai or Yngwie Malmsteen for this project?
No, other than writing for just Steve. Yngwie typically is not available to do anything. We did not reach out to him for this. We reached out to him to come up and play with us in Japan. Mm-hmm. And that didn't work. So I was in touch with Steve. And so I just reached out to Steve and said, hey, it'd be great. We're having these other people from Graham's past write and play on the record. Thought it'd be really cool if you did. So Steve sent me some ideas. That was a fairly completed idea, and which was great because it was Steve Vai from beginning to end. Really liked it. It's funny because that was just a song demo that he did with the players that he was working with at the time, which I'm not sure who they were, but it was a 3-piece thing that he sent me, and it was great. It was kicking ass. And Steve called it Dirty Like the City. That was just his working title for a demo. You know, you make up all these silly names and stuff for songs when you're writing. We got it, and Graham looked at it and went, wow, that's a cool name. I like that. So Graham wrote a lyric based around that, which is not about a city, but a really cool lyric.
So you mentioned that you reached out to guys from Graham's past, like Pelletieri, Bob Kulick, Nakai, and Molo. Was there any reach out to Michael Schenker or anybody in Rainbow?
No, not really. Graham had been working with Schenker. You know, he does the
Schenkerfest.
Yeah, the Schenkerfest thing. And when Michael writes for Michael. I don't know if Michael's ever written for anybody else. I mean, way back in Scorpions days, maybe, but nonetheless, yeah, we didn't reach out to him because Graham was with the guy, and our manager Giles knows Michael really well. I don't know him personally, but Steve Mann, his keyboard player, is a friend of ours and a friend of mine, and the 13th song on the record for Tony is a song about Graham's brother who passed some years ago, and Graham had written this piece for him. He wanted the best description is Graham wanted a Salvation Army brass thing, and I love the idea. So I'm not that guy to do that. So we reached out to Steve Mann. Steve Mann's father in England played in the Salvation Army band, so it couldn't have been better. So Steve really got it. So Steve did the horns, the brass arrangement, and playing on that, which came out just great. But yeah, Schenker, we didn't reach out to him. Actually, there was nobody else we reached out to. we had our hands full. We started getting into it with these guys, and I just said, "Wow, I'm kind of overwhelmed here because Dario's in Italy and Chris is in California, but just coordinating that and sending files and talking to people and stuff, that was enough for me."
It's been 34 years since the last album. I got to imagine that you guys have tried putting this together before, and it just didn't pan out.
Well, not really. I mean, Graham had a project some years ago that he called Alcatrazz with a couple other guys, but it never got off the ground. I mean, they played some gigs. They played a couple of shows in England, and I think they went to Japan, but it was just never successful. For whatever reason, it just didn't work. But they never did a record, and you kind of got to do a record. These days, anyway, I don't think. I mean, if you're Kiss, you can go out and play. They've got such a huge catalog of nothing but hits that they can go do that. They can go just play. But we couldn't do that. We knew in Alcatraz, the fans would not accept a band just coming out and just playing nothing but old Alcatraz songs. We had to get some new material. So Graham was just doing the stuff off the first album and a bunch of Rainbow stuff. And we do a lot longer show than that. So we're doing a more complete Alcatraz thing, but we're playing Shanker stuff, and we play new material and stuff off the Graham Bonnet Band records and stuff like that. So, but other than that, Graham and I never talked about doing Alcatraz before this.
What do you remember about recording the first Alcatraz album?
A lot of fun and almost live. We auditioned guitar players. We found Yngwie, and we got right to work writing. And Yngwie lived with me for a little while, and he and I wrote together, and then the record company got him a place, and then I would go down to his place and work and write. We went into the studio, which was Rockshire Records studio, and we set up, and we just played. And it was old school. We worked it out live in the studio, and we cut a lot of the tracks just almost live, and then went back in and did some overdubs and replaced some stuff. But it was a real band playing live kind of feel, which was great.
A lot different than today's recording.
Yeah, unfortunately, today it's very, very hard for everybody to get in one room and have the time to just play, work on songs and ideas. It takes, it's crazy.
Looking back, why do you think that Alcatraz didn't get that look from like a major label and kind of move to the next level?
You mean back in the day?
Yeah, back in the 80s, yeah.
Well, personally, I think this is what Capitol Records told me. I had some meetings with Don Grierson, who was VP of A&R, head of the label at the time. And Don and I talked, and Don said, you guys need to be opening. Iron Maiden was on Capitol. And Don Grierson goes, you guys either got to be opening for Iron Maiden and do that, or else you got to be more hits. You got to be a hit song band. And they wanted us to do some outside material, which would have been great. It was just a little too late at that point. We had done the record with Steve Vai, and again, it wasn't a heavy metal record, and it wasn't a pop record. Great songs, but not radio at the time, not radio friendly.
Yeah.
So we just fell in the middle. Our style was that, which we were just in, that we weren't heavy enough and we weren't poppy enough. We weren't Survivor and we weren't Iron Maiden. So there was no room at that time. You either had to be writing Eye of the Tiger or you had to be Iron Maiden, which gets no airplay at the time, but could sell out stadiums all over the world. You had to be one or the other in those days anyway. And
it's kind of ironic that as time goes on, Alcatraz becomes has this cult following. And, there's more demand for Alcatraz the longer you guys are apart.
Yeah, it is. It's really refreshing to me. I love it. And touring around the world, it's been amazing, the reception. And people just know every song we ever did and requesting stuff off all the records, mainly the first two records. But when we went to Japan with a 2.5 hour show, we played the whole No Parole record. People just loved it. So it is kind of a strange phenomenon, though, that it's such a cult resurgence. I mean, we ain't U2, but it is a nice. It's really cool that this many fans around the world want this. You know, they like it, so it's great. We're very fortunate.
Did I read correctly that you played on the Quiet Riot album with Paul Shortino?
Yes, that was their last album on CBS Records.
So, recently Frankie Banali passed away, and you played on that album. What do you remember about recording with the band, and how do you think that record came out in the end?
I thought the record came out great, actually. I loved recording with those guys. Frankie and I were really close. I was close to all of them. I mean, we were all good friends and hung out and spent a lot of time together. We cut that record live in the studio, almost. Frankie played his ass off. Great memories of that. A little too keyboard heavy for me, to be honest. I think the producer, Spencer Proffer, great producer, really knowledgeable guy as far as that goes, good at making records. But I think they were chasing what I call the white snake thing. Spencer turned me loose in the studio. He heard the demos and he said, I love your keyboards on the demos. Just come in the studio with an engineer and record your keyboards just like you did. So that's what I did, thinking, well, that's fine. I wrote a lot of that stuff, co-wrote a lot. Well, Paul and I and Carlos and Frankie wrote the whole thing, but I did the keyboards not ever thinking that they would be that prominent in the mix. A couple of songs, but not like that. And when he was mixing, I was kind of shocked. And I thought it was a mistake. I thought the band should have stayed really true to what they had been and done the heavier side of things. And then with some keyboards here and there. That's spoken from a keyboard player. I just step back, look at the big picture. Too much keyboards. That was a mistake.
Do you have any other projects in the works?
No, I'm playing on some different people's records, but no other projects per se. Mostly just playing and producing.
Whose other records are you playing on?
Working with Michael Bruce, who the original writer, and Alice Cooper. Michael's doing a record. We're doing a record together, and well, whole band. And I'm working on that, and I'm working on a record with a partner of mine, Stephen Rosen, who I've written with for years and years. Steve and I are doing a record with a singer in Italy, actually, David Reese. And we got most of the material together for that. So, and David works very fast, so that's going to be fun and no problem working this way over the internet. I'll go to LA to cut some guitars, but right now, those are the main things I'm doing. I've played on a couple of German records over the last 6 months. Gosh, I'm sad. I can't remember the guy's name. The record won't be out for another year, but I played on 5 tracks on that. And that was very rainbow-ish. So I played on that.
When you mentioned David Reese, that's the same one from Bangalore Choir and Accept?
Yes.
He just put out something this year is actually pretty good. So now that you said he's working on something else, I'm like, all right, it's going to be pretty good too.
He's a busy guy, great singer, great guy, and works so fast and really together. I can't say enough good things about him as a singer and a person.
That's all I got for you today, Jimmy.
Okay.
Thanks for speaking with Metal Express Radio.
Thank you very much for calling.